regulation. Interesting, isn't it?
Fascinating here compared to what's going on in the rest of the world.
Yes, yeah. Although it looks as though it's coming. I mean, but you were talking earlier about. Do you want to give us? Let's take the UK, because as far as we're concerned, that's the benchmark, and that's the sort of that's where we try and set the quality of what we do. Give us.
Well, the UK is principles based predominantly at the moment. It's very clear that advisors have a responsibility to a client, and everything they do in their practice has to be consistent with that. So what that means in day-to-day behaviour is that they have to look at each of their platforms, each of their tools, and make sure that they're both fit for purpose and that they're designed to benefit the client. And if there are weaknesses in the platform or in the tools, that they compensate for it. That's a very different process than I see here.
It's coming here, I think. The focus hasn't been so much on the quality of advice, particularly the quality of advice with regard to our area of interest, suitability with regard to risk. It's to some extent being taken as a given that would be done properly when we know that it's not, as it wasn't being done properly in the UK before the regulator got into the Act. There'd certainly be no doubt that somebody who is a fiduciary needs to, in giving advice, be giving suitable advice. But for the great bulk of advisors who don't yet identify with a fiduciary standard, they've essentially been looking at sort of the minimum acceptable to FINRA, but the rules have changed there because FINRA's brought in a new rule, 2111, which was a very big change, right? Very big change. But one part of it was it made risk tolerance a specific requirement for suitability. And this is the first time it's been singled out. Now, the mechanical parts of the big change are working their way through the system at the moment. So from my meeting with FINRA, FINRA is looking at making sure that member firms have put the big stuff in place, that they have new training programs, they have new processes, so they're doing the IT development that'll comply with 2111. And that'll run till the middle of this year, and then they'll start looking at the implementation. And as you know, my introduction was via the UK regulator, and they're certainly very aware of what the UK regulator is doing. And I know the people I spoke to think well of it. Now, how that actually translates through is another issue, but it's on the agenda now, and it wasn't before. So ever the optimist, I'm hoping that the quality of advice with regard to risk is going to improve considerably and match what's available elsewhere.
Well, certainly the UK is now just on a review 12 months in, and the reviews have been fairly positive.
Yeah.
If you go back 2 years, there was a great fear, the banning of commissions, new higher standards, there would be they would desert the middle market. And the UK, they're working their way through. The quality of advice has improved. There's a general acceptance that last year was a pretty good year. There's a small increase in the number of advisors, and there's now a focus on servicing the middle market with semi-automated solutions. And it seems to be going at a reasonable pace. There's no great trauma. 12 months out, the progress is good.
I think one of the, I'm sure it's one of the problems here, people resist change. It always gets resisted. And there tends to be a focus on the short term. And often the effect of change in the short term is negative. But if we're talking about improving the quality of advice, who loses out of that?
Yeah.
The client wins, the advisor wins, the firm with the investment product wins because there's longer retention. Probably the only people who lose are the lawyers because there's less litigation.
Yeah. The lawyers, thieves and vagabonds. Yeah, everybody else wins. In fact, the community wins because it gives confidence into the capital system, more capital in the market, more companies setting up, more people employed, more taxes paid. But there's a perfect cycle of virtue that goes there. We take it for granted. Look at India, where I travel quite extensively with Finametrica. There's no confidence in the system.
Yes. Yeah.
There's virtually no equity coming from the local community, and the infrastructure reflects it, and the economy reflects it. So when I'm in India, you see the pain, the anguish that's caused by everybody invests in term deposits, gold and property development.
Yeah.
Virtually no equity exposure at all. It's dropped by 50% since over the last 10 years. It's around about 3% exposure in the community invests back into equity.
Yeah.
So that's the outcome until you actually
Yes.
put confidence in the system.
Yep. Okay, so what do we say? Roll on good regulation.
We'll roll on regulation that's in the interest of clients because
Yes.
everybody wins.
Yes, absolutely.